See, personal stories are fine, and I'll tell you one example of this. I had a student about 4 years ago who essentially lost a leg, and because of which the GPA was low, multiple backlogs, finished engineering only in 6 or 7 years. The guy is working at Tesla now, by the way, doing very, very well in the US, which is very heartwarming. When I saw that LinkedIn post of that kid, really felt like, okay, what we are doing is making a difference, right? But there are certain cases which are absolutely ridiculous. Like, for instance, I had, one client who started the process with us. Shortlist was done, a good chunk of the material was done, and just called up and says, my father's getting me married, so I cannot do a master's degree anymore. Congratulations on your wedding, but what do you want us to do? And like, can you give me a full refund? So if you're not going to be going abroad because of a personal reason, that's on you. The next morning, we had a visit from, a cop from the police station saying that there is a fraud case, right? Saying that you took the money and you disappeared. Right? So that is the craziness that we have to deal with in the service industry. So I know that we are doing something different now. Usually on Gradvine's, on Gradvine's YouTube channels, usually just my face talking in a monotonous, tone very, very seriously. I know we want to keep it a little bit more raw, right, in terms of the whole, study abroad scene. And I know, Alankrita, you work in marketing for us, but maybe think about it from your time when you're applying for a master's. I don't think a lot of the audience knows. Like, this is Alankrita, by the way. Or which camera do I look into? That one. All right, great. And you have to look into that one. I'm sorry, first time we are doing this. But yeah, so Alankrita works in marketing for us. She's honestly the mind behind a lot of the YouTube videos that come out. But she also approached us as a master's applicant in the past. So I think she's going to ask a lot of questions, and we are going to have a free-flowing discussion about a variety of topics, right from should someone study abroad to some of the weird cases that we've had at Gradvine and our journey so far. So I hope that this will be useful to a lot of folks. So in fact, this is not going to be an interview, so let me just go ahead and ask you, like, I know that you were planning to study abroad. Why were you thinking about it at that point?
So I'll be honest, when I was studying abroad, there were a lot of peers who were talking about applying abroad, and for me, why I felt it, because I felt like a lack of academic fulfillment when I was studying in college, and I felt like whatever I'm studying, I'm not doing justice to what I'm learning at all. And I felt like maybe if I go abroad, the practical exposure is going to be a little bit better. And but one major reason that was also stopping me was the fact that, or maybe I was ill-informed, that it is an expensive affair, being able to study abroad. So that is one of the major reasons why I even dropped out of the plan. So when I also approached Gradvine, I asked about this, like, about the costs and everything, and I was definitely reassured. But then I think I just was little ill-informed in terms of that, and also the fact that it's an entirely new culture and I'm staying away from home for the first time, that I, gave up on the idea.
And I think that's the fundamental thing I wanted to start this with, right? Like, on a very broad level, why should anyone study abroad? And this is weird coming from a guy who had no intention of staying abroad. So I finished college and from a top-notch school, right? I had my peers from Dartmouth earning like 100K, 110K easy at that point in time, which 10 years back was like a lot of money. Yeah. And I didn't even look for a job. I finished on a Friday, came back on Sunday, and I'm sending people abroad. And almost ironically, the number of people I talk to and tell them that, hey, maybe going abroad is not right for you, stay back in India, there are better opportunities, there are a significant number, right? Yeah. But I think the objective varies. Like, for example, you want to buy a house, you want to drive a fancy car early, like, people have different priorities and respect to them, right? They want to save a lot of money in a shorter quantum of time and maybe buy land back in India. That's the case with a lot of Telugu students that go out, right? I'm sure a lot of you Telugu guys who are watching will resonate with that, right? All real estate in Telangana. So doing that while working in India, unless you're really, really good, like the cream of the crop, is incredibly difficult, right? We know we pay our EMIs for like 20, 25 years to buy a, 2 BHK, 3 BHK apartment. But because of the way the economy is set up, if you want to save a large quantum of money early, you want to buy that house in the US or invest back in India, and you want to create wealth in a relatively shorter period of time. I guess if you do want to create wealth in a short period of time, that's probably the most reliable way you can do it. And of course, not in all countries, and I think we'll get to that, some of the funky countries that people go to for no reason. But again, whether you want to study abroad or no is really dependent on you. Honestly, if somebody calls me and says I have a 30 LPA job and I have like 2 years or 3 years of work experience, I'd say then don't go, boss. Like, you should be plenty fine here. But there are a bunch of reasons, like you want to create wealth, you want a better work-life balance, maybe you want to grow vertically within a particular tech space, your intellectual curiosity is not satisfied. That's when you should definitely do it. Not like you were saying because your friends are doing it.
Correct.
Maybe they have different objectives, but because you want to create wealth or you want to satiate your intellectual curiosity, but of course picking the right programs. And I have like a whole bunch of people who pick like moronic programs and go.
Yeah, yeah. So you were saying that, if somebody has like a 30 LPA and 2 years of experience doing great, so then it might not make as much sense for them to go abroad or so when you give out this sort of advice, I'm sure a lot of people come to you for advice on these topics. How do you actually dole out that advice to these people?
It's tricky, right? Because look, at the end of the day, we are running a business and we have bills to pay, we have salaries, we have to run our office. And but what I've realized is the people that we've said no to, like we say that, hey, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to go right now, just continue here, because from your career's perspective, I've seen graduates from 4 or 5 years, maybe that delta is not as much, so just stay along. So we lose plenty of customers and that hurts all the time, right? Whereas sometimes they may go to a competitor and that's pure sales, right? They're not going to tell anybody, don't go abroad. They're going to sell dreams, and maybe they pay something and they make a mistake which pinches, right? Like, not because we lost the customer, because there was wrong advice there, given to somebody else. But what we've realized over time is the people we say no to, if they believe that our advice is genuine, and a lot of times they do, because they realize that there's no bias when we are giving them that advice, right? They might refer somebody for whom going abroad is a good idea, right? So that's where we've had organic growth. So that's why we are comfortable giving out that advice. Like, on our free consultations, I'm pretty sure people watching this would know that they've been told that doing something is a bad idea, very, very honestly, right? And yeah, again, look, some people who are earning that 30 LPA also might realize maybe in terms of long-term growth, they're going to stagnate or they hit a ceiling.
Correct.
Or just that their manager is a jerk, right? You cannot deal with that. In India, people call you on Saturdays and Sundays, they don't want to deal with that. They come and tell me that I want a very chilled out work-life balance, and then we suggest Europe, because that's just how it is to a large extent, right? So it's a multitude of factors. It's annoying when it becomes a default thing in India where you just have to do a master's and just people are just going for the sake of going. But a balance is something that absolutely needs to be maintained. It can make sense for some, it can make no sense to certain others. So we'll have to sit down and figure that out on a case-to-case basis, and people have to be honest with themselves, honestly.
And speaking of a multitude of factors when making that decision, what do you think are the most important factors to consider whether studying abroad is even a good idea for a particular individual?
Your risk appetite comes in, right? So risk appetite is a huge part of it. See, the thing is, India is already a decent or a very good job market, right? So the country that you're going to has to have a better job market, obviously, right? That is the biggest factor. Like, there needs to be a strong economy where people are willing to give you jobs as an international student, where there is so much economic growth that companies are not able to meet their needs with the local talent and graduates available. That's the only reason why you go abroad. So you have to ask yourself what the strong economies are, right? That's the first biggest factor, and that's where the US stands out. It's the biggest economy in the world by far. Combine a lot of the biggest economies in Europe together, not nearly the size of the US, right? So obviously the size of the economy comes in, but the other part of it, right, and the factor that you need to consider, and why I say risk appetite is, for every country that you go into, the country needs to let you stay as well, right?
Yes.
You have a lot of job opportunities, sure, but if the visa and immigration norms are not friendly enough and they're going to boot you out immediately, that's going to be a problem, right? So you need to be able to have that confidence in yourself that you're going to be able to secure a job within the defined norms of the visa period. I'm not going to go into the details of the countries because we've done dime a dozen videos on the same, but you have to be very cognizant of the fact that there is a certain element of risk that you're taking for the reward of wealth creation within a short period of time. I think that rapid rate of wealth creation, India is not there yet, right? Still home loans are incredibly expensive, right? So to clear off those EMIs and stuff like that, it's still going to take you donkey's years to create that sort of wealth in a short period of time. But there is an element of risk involved in case the country boots you out. At which point you spent a ton of money, but you have to come back and earn rupees, which is a scary situation. But with the right courses, right country, right timing, I think that risk can be mitigated to a large extent. But you have to be aware of that risk that you're taking before making that decision.
Yeah. And also because the point of us creating all this content is to make sure that we give out as unbiased and informed, accurate advice as possible. We do a bunch of different stuff about different countries, different places, different job markets. What would you say is the current state of the study abroad scene? What is it like as of now?
I mean, that's a very broad question, right? Like, if you talk to me about students, irrespective of what you say about the conditions in the West, right, which are challenging without doubt. Like the UK is going through its own mess. Not that the UK is a great country to go to study in any case. The US is in a little bit of political uncertainty, so the situation is challenging, right? But I've been doing this, Alankrita, for like 7 or 8 years now. I was there during Trump's first term. That was probably the worst time to start a company like Gradvine, but we saw significant growth at that point in time. But we've seen enough to know that everything that goes up comes down, everything that stays down goes up, right?
Yes.
It's a sine curve, especially when you go to big economies, massive economies like the US and India, for a sense. We don't stay up or down for too long. It keeps going along. And this is not insights that I'm giving, like I'm not pulling this information out. I don't know if you're going to censor that, but all right, if you have to do it. But yeah, it's essentially talking to people who are in the market, who are looking at the job search. In fact, a lot of the Gradvine students who've gone 6 or 7 years back are recruiting right now, right? So they know what members they need in their team and stuff like that. So they're telling us that, okay, now it's down, but it's going to come up. We've seen several of these cycles, and you know it as well. You've seen several of these cycles. So the state of the study abroad industry right now, yes, going abroad, studying in the US, the job market is challenging, but that's not going to remain constant. It's probably going to come back up. So we know that it levels out overall. If you look at it from a student's perspective, I think one thing that students don't understand or realize that this year, if the US economy or the Western economy is down, the Indian job market is not great either.
Absolutely.
Right? So we see a lot of folks, in fact, a large number of folks still looking to do that degree abroad because they don't have anything else to do because the campus placements are not coming in, especially from tier 2, tier 3 institutions. It's being major challenge at this point in time. And the number of people going year on year, not just with Gradvine students, overall in the industry to the US is only increasing every year. Do I foresee that changing? I don't know. Right? Like I said, it's such a dependent process. There are going to be people who just want to escape from their nagging relatives here, right? Who go. That's also a real factor, right? So there's always going to be a market. There's always going to be a bunch of people going. I just hope that they keep making more informed choices. It's sad that in this day and age of the internet penetration, right? Earlier, what data did we have? When I had to apply, there was nothing available on Google, right? We didn't have LinkedIn. Right? But even in this day and age, people are making honestly moronic decisions in terms of the kinds of countries and programs they're choosing. And a lot of times when we try to convince them otherwise, also it goes into an argument where they're trying to make their point. And the standard statement comes, I have my friends who went there and they're doing okay, but you can't base your data on 3 friends, right? Like that's the problem with it. So unfortunately, I don't think the decision-making process has evolved. I think a lot of the mistakes we see happening year on year. But I hope that a lot of students get wiser about the entire process.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you just said, the whole industry has kind of become a breeding ground for misinformation. There is information flying out left, right, center. Nobody knows what is right, what is wrong. How difficult is it to just stand your ground while there is like all of these rumors spreading and all of that happening? How difficult or easy is it to stand your ground and make sure that you're still giving the same amount of current unbiased advice even though you're at the risk of being in trouble for it?
It's no trouble. Like honestly, the reason why we keep it honest and are unbiased with the entire thing is because we have no choice. Right? We cannot outspend a lot of the competitors in the market because they have funding, right? They have insane amounts of funding. They have deep pockets. In fact, none of them are profitable, and that's a separate discussion and to each their own. But fact of the matter is we cannot outspend and push in our propaganda at all, right? We are going to get blown out of proportion. The number of ads these guys run everywhere, right? I'm pretty sure even on this Gradvine video, on every Gradvine video, people get ads of various other competitors. So we cannot outgun them. The only way we can set ourselves apart in the industry is by doling out this advice and being unbiased, and keeping our stand of not being tied up with universities, so that people start seeing value, and that's what's worked. It's not a noble thing. I think yes, there is some element of being genuine as a
Yes.
part of it, but a large part of it is that's the only way we can survive and get into customers. But Alankrita, I'll tell you what, it's getting a lot more difficult right now, the last 3 or 4 years specifically, because earlier we were competing with small brick and mortar consultancies in some bylane somewhere, where very clearly the credibility of the folks, or maybe the type of communication was not strong, so people could see through that. That
Yes.
okay, this doesn't seem very convincing. But now the same business models are being packaged into fancier setups, right?
Yes.
I'm not going to take names, but startups, ed tech, beautiful websites, so-called AI tools for doing a shortlist. I still can't for the life of me understand how an AI can do a shortlist, and we'll talk about that eventually. I do want to definitely get into it. But the problem is they're being packaged into such fancy edtech solutions, which seem so legitimate at this point in time, that students are falling for it.
Yes.
That, oh, they seem so big, they won so many different awards and all of that, they probably can't be doling out advice. But at the end of the day, they're still tie-up models, right? They're still tied up with universities in the UK, which are not going to get you a job. They're still tied up with nonsense universities in the US, which we don't even know how legitimate they are, right? So they're still trying to sell you stuff. They're telling you that it's the ultimate thing you can do by going to this university. And when that level of bias comes in, it's never going to benefit you, right? So it's more difficult for students right now to discern, because the legitimacy of these, big scale, so-called edtech startups is so strong that you are compelled to maybe believe them. They can't be wrong, right? If they're doing it at such scale. But unfortunately, the repercussions are being felt now by the students who've gone there. I get messages from the same people who argued with me 2 or 3 years back, when they say that I got an admit in this university, should I go? I say it's crap, don't go, right? I'm on LinkedIn DMs, I'm very unfiltered, like it's useless, you won't get a job. They text back saying that I should have listened to you, now I'm coming back, can you help me out with something else, which obviously at that point we can't. But yeah, we have to stay unbiased, but unfortunately it's very difficult for students who are falling into this trap at this point in time.
Yeah. And I am sure a lot of students who come to us for advice have definitely spoken to multiple players in the scene, and they already probably have some amount of misinformation already. They might not know. So what are the common concerns that you see when you talk to these students? What are the kind of questions they ask that make you absolutely go, what is happening?
There are a bunch of these also, right? Like one part of it is, saying a university is bad. Like obviously they bring up some tie-up universities where the fee is low and they think it's so cheap, so let me go. But they don't understand that they're going to be left with debt, right? Spending 30 lakhs on nonsense is much worse off than spending 50 lakhs on something that will actually get you a job, right? That's a big factor. So let's leave that aside. The other part about it is dishonest evaluations, right? And that is partly because the person on the other side of the call at a lot of these places has absolutely no clue. So like honestly, if somebody comes in with like a 7 GPA or a 6.8 GPA and says I want to get into UT Austin and UC Berkeley for a computer science, you're not going to get in, right?
Yeah.
And we say that very honestly, because setting expectations is very important, right? However, if there is a competitor or somebody else who says that, yeah, sure, you can try, you might get in, right? They're going to be compelled to go there, right? Which is again foolishness at the end of the day, because if you're not balancing out your lists and you're not picking universities wisely, you're just wasting your time and money, because these applications all cost money, right? You can't just keep randomly, shooting at $100 or something per application on average. So that is another thing in terms of setting expectations. I think students are completely mismatched. In fact, fortunately, we've started this WhatsApp community, and I think basis of our work, our reach, fortunately, we had about 3,500 people, coming in. And then the way they pick universities also, they're doing it for the first time, so I don't blame them. But there's one UT Austin and there's one UT Arlington in the same list, which are like poles and worlds apart, right? So I don't expect students to be aware, because they're probably doing the process for the first time, and hopefully for their sake the last time. But there's again a ton of misinformation, that keeps flowing in terms of the kinds of universities these guys can get into.
So again, going back to misinformation, people are getting information left, right, center, even in the age of internet. The thing is, the internet is so vast that you don't have any way to really trust the information that you are getting. So what are some red flags that you absolutely need to look out for when you are looking for a university or guidance or anything of that sort?
I think the age of internet is not the problem. The age of Instagram is the huge issue, right? Like everybody wants to get information in like 30 seconds and like 45 seconds. And now I heard there's something called a 1 second thing, right? And I've seen study abroad guys do it like 1 second and then they're sipping coffee or doing some nonsense and say some 14 universities in Lithuania or some crap like that, right? And this is a plague, right? Like honestly, I'm not being an old uncle here. Like Instagram is fun. I scroll Instagram all the time too, but it's so freaking annoying when we have a very, very detailed 1 hour webinar where we are talking about how you should shortlist universities or craft an SOP paragraph by paragraph, and we've done so much of that sort. And then one chap says, can you do a reel on this in 1 minute, right? Like, boss, there are certain things you can look at reels for, like you can look at a kid falling and laugh at that person, or watch slapstick comedy, or watch travel videos, but not for education. I think that is the biggest problem. And because of this attention span issue, right, I don't even know how many people will watch this video, which will save them a world of trouble, honestly, if they watch the entire thing. Like, it'll save them like tons and tons and tons of trouble if they spend this 45 minutes or an hour watching this entire thing. But because that attention span is so very short, they're scrolling Instagram and then they see things like 14-day admit guarantee, which is like the biggest red flag. Like, if you see that, run away, like run a mile away. Like, if a university is guaranteeing you, or a company is guaranteeing you an admit within 14 days guaranteed, you know for a fact, you can write it down and I will give it to you in writing, that it's a crap university you won't get a job from, right? A university is good only if there's a solid selection process. Why is the selection process important? Because it means that there are quality students coming into the class.
Yeah.
Why are quality students in a class important? It is because recruiters know that there's going to be 50 kids who are bright and probably will fit their bill for a specific role. If you're doing 14-day admit guarantees, 100% a lot of these universities are going to have folks who are absolutely nowhere hireable, right? And companies know that there's nothing worthwhile there. So you're just doing the degree for the sake of doing a degree. And that's the problem that comes with this reel culture and everybody seeking advice on Instagram. And I see random people who, so-called influencers again, who've gone to nonsense universities, right? Maybe I sound a little, condescending saying this, but at the end of the day, you need to get advice from people who've done the process right. So if you're getting advice from somebody who's gone to a crap university, which is like absolutely tied up with a consultancy, and then they're, hyping up the fact that studying abroad is great or giving you advice on how you should do it on their 30 seconds reels or whatever, why are you taking that advice, right? Sure, it's convenient, but I think this whole Instagram penetration has been a bane for the entire study abroad industry. Unfortunately, most of the kids there just want instant advice which seems convenient with minimal effort, and the repercussions will be not felt now, it will be felt 2 or 3 years later once you graduate and you realize you're in trouble. Right, so yeah, that's a huge problem, like honestly.
At the risk of sounding like Instagram haters, we see these 14-day admit guarantees, without a visa apply abroad, and such schemes being rolled out. What kind of questions do people come up to you with after looking at all of this, and what does it make you feel like when you have to answer all those questions?
Yeah, I mean, it gets annoying, right? Like, fortunately, we don't do free consultations anymore. The first 2 years of Gradvine, Suraj and I took every free consultation call, and we'd get annoying questions, right? But I talked to Yash and Chandan and Ashu and the other guys who do the free consultation calls and subsequently sales. One question is, but there is this XYZ consultancy who's guaranteeing me an admit. They're saying they'll fill my applications, they will write my SOP, and they're doing it for free, and they're giving me an admit in like 14 days. Why are you charging so much for doing the application? I have to give a draft of my SOP, I have to go through the process, you're saying it takes 3 months, right? Without understanding that there is a world of a difference between the university giving you an admit and the universities that you're gunning for, right? And it is also surprising and is a reflection of the sad state of exposure that a lot of engineering students have. that a lot of good profiles, 8 pointers, 8.5 from good universities, making this argument, right? Stating that, okay, we are not here, I don't know why they view us as some sort of a commodity to make their lives only easier, like we are delivering a product. Whereas when they go to college or school where they're getting trained and inadequately so, nobody has a complaint about it, right? So they don't look at us as mentors who are trying to ensure the best for their career, and the fact that we are investing our time to make sure we do that, and are instead looking at us as, you know, some sort of instant gratification that we, you know, deliver an admit or something of that sort, right? So that's the biggest problem, like on these calls. Like it just seems like such a rosy picture and such a salesy call everywhere else, that it's hard to justify why getting into good universities is a challenging process, which it absolutely is. You need to go through the grind for these 2, 3, 4 months in order to make it to some good places overall.
Yeah. Speaking of going through the grind, everywhere we see there is this done for you thing. Somebody will write your SOP, somebody will fill out your application, you just probably have to click on the submit button. How important is it for a student to go through the entire process on their own?
Depends on the university. Like if you're going to a crap university, it doesn't matter. Like the SOPs that are being written and 14-day admit guarantees, nobody even reads them. I'm being very honest. If you're applying to good places and you have a good profile, then that is where the SOP makes a difference. I'm never going to advocate for the fact that if your profile is crap, you write the most beautiful SOP that's written by, you know, God himself or herself in human form. It's not going to get you in, right? But if you have a profile and you have a shot, that's where the application materials make a difference. And honestly, none of the admissions committees are looking for some beautifully written document that is a work of art, right? They just want you to be an honest reflection of you. And how can somebody else give an honest reflection of you? It needs to be some input or a significant input from your end, right? So that's why SOPs, you have to put in the effort. I'm not saying spend like 3 months writing it, but spend a week, spend 10 days. We've seen people who put in a few hours, maybe 4 days before a deadline, but they're still telling their story, make it into top tier schools. That Dima dozen examples, right? Yeah. But it is important that you don't look at somebody else making life easy for you, because the top schools really want to understand your story, and that's where your input needs to come in as students overall.
Yeah. Diving a little deeper into this topic, we speak to a lot of admission officers about, you know, the kind of documents that they come across all the time. And they, I think one of the biggest concerns that even I've heard while on these calls is that everything looks like a template and everything has been fit into that template. So for students who are working on their documents, who are watching this, what would be like the 3 absolute things that they shouldn't miss when they are writing out their SOPs or submitting their essays or applications? What would you tell them?
Yeah, and this is honestly, we have the privilege of, you know, working with some fantastic universities, right? Again, I wouldn't say working with, but they collaborate. Again, no, you know, bias or no monetary involvement whatsoever. It's just out of the goodness of their hearts and our intention also that students should hear from them, because they are the guys who make the decisions. And then Johns Hopkins, Purdue, Tufts, in the past Duke as well has done sessions for us. And while we are setting up these sessions, I get to pick their brains, right? And you're absolutely right. They talk about how everybody is almost saying the same thing, right? And some of these same things include just praising the university a lot. Like you cannot butter admissions officers into giving you an admit, right? So if you're constantly saying your university is great, that professor is great, somebody else is great, they know they're great, right? You don't have to write a big document to talk about that. But how are you going to leverage what the university has to offer to get to where you want to be? Have you thought about that enough is what they want to know. Secondarily, a lot of these documents by students, mind you, who are doing a fairly decent job, right? If somebody is at this stage, and for all of you watching, right, if you are at this stage, you're probably doing a decent job. You need that little bit of a nudge to make it a little better, is making your SOP a list of achievements, right? So I did this, I did that, then I did this, then I did that, which is not really completely what they're looking for. It might do the job in some cases, but why did you take this activity up? What did you learn from it? Why did you move on to the next one? They want to understand the thought process and your evolution through each of these elements or projects or internships or research that you've done. It shouldn't be a listicle of stuff that you've done to show and impress the admissions committee, right? They want to know who you are through that document and how you evolved through the power of your work. while these documents need to be fairly technical, they also want to see the person behind, this technical stuff. Another mistake that I see people making is especially candidates who have very good technical profiles, right, and applying to very technical programs like a data science, MLAI, computer science. They think that they have to bring in some sort of a volunteering and some element. I remember a student who wrote about such a brilliant profile overall, like it was like I think it was an 8-pointer from an IIT or something, insisted on writing an entire paragraph about how she did one event called Dog Walk or something, and then to raise awareness about illnesses in dogs or something of that sort, in a pure masters in computer science statement of purpose. I have nothing against dogs, right? Like, in fact, I classify myself as a bit of a dog lover overall, but not in your SOP, right? So why do you want to write about that when you're applying for a master's in computer science? So you have to understand these are very fairly objective documents. Don't write about your blood donation camp and how you were feeling weak after 4 hours. And I've seen people write nonsense like this, right? So please don't do that. Like, keep it technical, keep it objective, keep your goals in, and show how you've evolved professionally, because these are highly professional documents. I think that's what needs to be kept in mind with statements of purpose.
Sure. I have also, helped people with their essays for a bit. And something that I've seen very commonly is starting off with a quote, writing their whole life story, talking about extremely personal incidents. And it makes me think from an admission officer's perspective, is that something that they would want to know about you for giving you an admit to a program that is probably highly technical or highly management oriented? So how do you actually make sure you structure it out?
No, see, personal stories are fine, and I'll tell you one example of this, right? I had a student about 4 years ago who essentially lost a leg, right? It was because of a very intrusive tumor, right? Again, I'm forgetting the exact medical condition, but the chap lost a leg essentially, right? And because of which the GPA was low, multiple backlogs, finished engineering only in 6 or 7 years. The guy is working at Tesla now, by the way, doing very, very well in the US, which is very heartwarming. When I saw that LinkedIn post of that kid, really felt like, okay, what we are doing is making a difference, right? And very good profile otherwise in terms of projects. So you asked me about personal stories, right? It's fine in this case because the entire statement of purpose was how he wants to go do an engineering management degree and make cost-effective prosthetic limbs through a manufacturing facility in India. Brilliant. And how he's worked on designing that with a professor, and he's done a decent job of it, but really how to bring the cost down, setting up a manufacturing facility, the operational efficiencies, the product design part of it, right? So that was the entire goal, right? Which is fine to tell a personal story about, that absolutely works. But in that case, it made a lot of sense. And this candidate made it to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I'm doing very, very well now at Tesla. So in that sort of cases, you absolutely can, right? Make a case for yourself. So personal stories are fine as long as it's relevant. I don't see how you donating blood is going to help you develop, some sort of ML and AI algorithms for Amazon, right? So you have to be a little prudent on that, a little bit of back and forth, right? Honestly, we do have templates, we have SOP guidelines, we do videos, but there's nothing like a good SOP. And that's why I ask students not to look at references, right? Because if you're looking at references and you're getting influenced, you are not telling your strongest story. If this chap looked at a standard 2 years at Microsoft, SDE, who's looking at, an MEM degree and talking about product management in big tech, that entire story would have gone to waste, right? So you have to put forth your strongest profile essentially.
Yes. So while we do a lot of our webinars, while we engage with people on our community, while we talk to so many students, we come across this one, overarching question that going to the big brands is an expensive affair. If I can pursue the same degree at a smaller university or a smaller brand which is cheaper, why should I not go ahead and do it? So why do you think the brand matters?
Brands are expensive, but once again, I don't say that brands are for everyone. Like I talk about the risk reward, how much you're comfortable investing. I wouldn't say everybody has to go for a brand, but there are advantages, right? Let me tell you an example of the contrary. Do you know that Sunny Buffalo sees a lot of folks from NITs and IITs going in? Wow. Right, like Sunny Buffalo, and Sunny Buffalo is a good school, but nobody would call it elite, right? Yes. The reason being they're very practical about it, right? They realize that, okay, I have a very good profile, and these are folks with 4-5 years of work experience who again have immigrated because for whatever personal reason they want to shift. right? It's not like if you're from a top tier school, you're working for 4 or 5 years, you're absolutely staying there, right? It's such a personal choice. So they decide to shift because the cost is so low and they have confidence in their abilities that they will secure that first job and then they will grow, right? And it comes down to the fundamental fact that irrespective of the university you go to, as long as it's decent, not a crap university where that first job itself doesn't come through, if you're good at your job, you will absolutely grow, right? So we see people from non-Ivy leagues and not even the top 20, top 30 schools still do very well in their careers. But here is where the brand makes a difference, and I'll tell you a story about this, right? I had one of my colleagues, right? One of my contemporaries rather, will be my age, so should be in his 30s right now, maybe a little older. Went to a brand name MBA program, right? Like I'm talking about one of the M7s, pretty much. While he was there were a couple of students from I'm not going to name the country specifically, but one of the countries in North or Central Africa, right? And this person who was a peer, they became friends, they built a network, they were on touch on LinkedIn, maybe on touch on WhatsApp or whatever phone numbers, ended up becoming the mining minister of that particular country, right? And this guy was into the mining business in India, and then he was able to, shift there, set up a business there because of the contact and connection that he's built, through business school, and is minting millions right now, right? Brands have networks that are unparalleled. Brands open doors years down the line, which you cannot quantify overall, right? So if you send somebody a message on LinkedIn, right, the likelihood that they'll open it, if you have a Columbia, for instance, on your LinkedIn is far higher than having a no-name university, right? People just take you more seriously. Maybe you have a friend who's working at a big VC fund in a very senior position, whereas instead of going through the entire pitching process, you can call and say, can you get me in front of a panel when you start up, right? That's where brands make a difference. And that's why I ask students not to be myopic. It's fine if you decide that practically it doesn't make sense, I cannot afford that sort of a tuition fee for a Columbia or something of that sort. It's fine, but understand that there is always going to be a long-term benefit. The argument that why should I spend so much when everybody is getting a job doesn't hold water in the long term. But it depends on you on a case-to-case basis.
Speaking of practicality and confidence in themselves, I think we have dealt with a lot of impractical, proud, and possibly overconfident people too, and we've had our fair share of annoying customers as well. Can you tell me some of those stories? How do you deal with that?
I don't think it's fair to say that is the general case. Yes, there are annoying customers. I'll be completely honest and say at the scale at which we operate, right? There's about 7,000 to 8,000 free consultation calls where we are very honest. There's honest advice which most people like, a lot of people may not like. And we do between 700 to 1,000 paying customers, and that's been for like 7 years now, right? At the sheer volume that we are operating at, no one can be perfect, right? And I would be the first one to admit that there are maybe 2 or 3 processes, 4 processes every year where genuinely there's been a mistake from our end, right? And that's completely open on our Google reviews or whatever. But there are certain cases which are absolutely ridiculous. Like for instance, I had one client who started the process with us, did the entire shortlist was done, a good chunk of the material was done. We invested 2-3 months of our time in the process, and then just called up and says, my father is getting me married, so I cannot do a master's degree anymore. And I said, okay, we did congratulations on your wedding, but what do you want us to do? And like, can you give me a full refund? And then we say, absolutely not, right? Because we've done the entire service, we've spent 2-3 months with you, multiple people have spent time, there's an account manager, a mentor, I spent time with your shortlist, and then there are editors who worked on your essay. So if you're not going to be going abroad because of a personal reason, that's on you. Promptly the next morning, we had a visit from, a cop from the police station saying that there is a fraud case, right? Saying that you took the money and you disappeared. Right? So that is the craziness that we have to deal with in the service industry, and that's something that we cannot help. Again, fortunately, because we had everything documented, we are a professional company, we had a lawyer on board, and we had itna khatta of documents with every single message sent to the student, email, shortlist calls, all of that decided. So we were able to get out of it. But yeah, people are unreasonable in terms of those sorts of expectations, and then they deal with that. I see multiple people coming with backlogs who we said that don't apply to these top tier schools, you're not going to get in, not like it, and then say that these guys only send you to universities that are easy to get into, despite maybe more than 70% of our admits being top 20s, like a Duke or a Purdue or a Hopkins, which are not easy to get into, right? So we deal with a lot of these cases. Genuinely, some processes are messed up. Those reviews are available because we are the only guys who again keep an open Google console. I think nobody else does that. They hide it somewhere, so there's no avenue to give a review as well. It's only testimonials. And another thing that cropped up very recently is Reddit, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that's a little bit of a pet peeve, and I'm going to address it in this video because what do we have to lose? Random people. We've tried to actually find out who those people are. If they've genuinely had a bad experience with us, we asked for a receipt number, but received no reply whatsoever, right? And then we realized it's a couple of competitors just doing it, right? Again, we can't be sure, but that's the thing with Reddit, it's completely anonymous. So not saying that we have a perfect process. Every company that operates at scale will have some mistakes that creep in. Yeah, we do deal with our crazies as well, which is always stressful during season.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be the first to acknowledge that no process at scale can be perfect. Like I said, there'll be 2, 3 or 4 that genuinely we might have made a mistake, and we are completely accepting of that. That's just the nature of the business overall. But never for a lack of trying.
Yeah.
I see how this place is for the last 7 years now. On December 15th, Jan 15th, where despite having very strict terms and conditions saying that we have a 3-day turnaround time, you have to respond, students still have sent us essays at 11 p.m. on the 14th of January, and we've still turned it around. Nobody complains. People know that we are doing, the students' future is on us. So it's okay if we forego a little bit of sleep on those 2 or 3 days, and we still do turnarounds right until deadline day. Again, this is not a cue for you guys who signed up with us to do that to us, right? It's in your own disinterest if you're doing it, but never for a lack of trying, right? We reach out multiple times, we push multiple times. Despite that, if there is some sort of frustration because things didn't go well, or maybe unreasonable expectations or unreasonable demands, that is twisted in terms of that sort of a narrative that comes up. But we are not complaining about it. That's the nature of our business. And there are maybe 100 success stories to 1 or 2 complaints, which I think is a pretty decent ratio. Now, beyond that, perfection is not something that is possible for us to deliver overall.
Yeah. So, speaking of success stories, I am sure a lot of students are watching this and probably planning their journey of studying abroad. What is it that you would want to tell them about the decision that they're making, and how do they go about the whole process?
Get your advice from people who know their stuff. I'm not saying, again, I know that we've done a lot of Gradvine stuff and how we are different and all, but it's not a promotional thing. I'm sure you've added a lot of value with the other information as well. But as long as you have access to somebody who is reasonable, who has the right information and is spending time to give out advice, that's where you need mentorship for, right? Don't try and do it all on your own because you're doing it for the first time, and you're going to be wasting a lot of time avoiding pitfalls. But if you have somebody, it may not be a Gradvine mentor, but somebody you genuinely believe knows their stuff, is an expert in the field and is giving you unbiased advice and has a technical background to help you out with the same, by all means go ahead and get that advice and that mentorship, because it can save you a lot of pain and it can elevate your application, right? So if you have the wherewithal, the resources to get that sort of advice and access, by all means go ahead and do that. But please don't pick somebody who makes life supposedly easier, who's selling you easy dreams. And honestly, you should be smart enough to realize who's giving you bullshit and who's giving you genuine advice, right? So don't simply pay somebody because they've scared you into it, but rather convinced you into how they are the best partner. Or if it's a senior or somebody in your network who's willing to help out, by all means get that done with them, right? You can do your process on your own in that case, pretty much. So yeah, I don't know how well this video is going to do. Something different that we tried out. I think we're also planning one with Suraj and I, that might come before or after this. So we'll have to figure that out. But yeah, I thought these unfiltered sort of conversations might benefit students who are in the midst of the process or thinking about it in the future, or even people who've gone through the process to have a laugh about the entire journey, right? Because it's such a, for the lack of a better word, interesting landscape.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that the audience finds this conversation a little compelling. If you did not and you found it boring, also comment below. We won't put out more such content. But if you want more such conversations, please do drop a like and a comment saying what you liked about it.